Hi, it's Kai from SWOOP, and I'm with our Chief Scientist, Lawrence Lockley, to talk about a particular aspect of our 2019 Workplace Benchmarking Report. We've just completed that study led by Laurie, and we looked at 68 organizations, 630,000 people, and 12 million interactions. So we've done a deep dive into what people are actually doing on Workplace. As I said, today we're going to be focusing particularly on the data set that relates to groups. So tell us particularly about the data set for groups, Laurie, and what the key insights are for that.
Yeah, fine. Well, the nice thing about Workplace is that when you start a group, it asks you what are you going to use that group for, and you're given some choices, and some of you may recall there's teams and projects, and there's discussion, there's announcement, and then there's social non-work groups are the key four, if you like. Because of that, we're able to sort of separate the data out for each type and then do a deep dive into that type so that we can develop insights right down at that group type level. The first one on the left, the teams and project group, actually comprise 57% of our sample, something like 2,500 groups. So we had about 1,300 teams, I guess, to analyse. So that's huge, really. So, and what we found was that, I guess the biggest insight was that the teams were very large, right? Because with digital, it's not hard to create a big team, and people do. So the average size team was something like just under 300 people. So that's huge. So
it actually suggests that maybe they aren't really teams.
Exactly. I think what we see a lot in the digital space is that people want to include all their stakeholders as well. Now the problem with that is that then the team can't really operate because you've got this gallery of 200 people, if you like, or more, looking at what you're doing. So I think that's an area that we've really got to think about much more deeply than we have. So, but nevertheless, the teams that did perform well by our measures, were smaller, less than 10 people generally. They're much more responsive. The team members are all talking to each other. So there's very much a lot of reciprocity in the team. The sorts of things that we like to see in a collaborative team.
And is it right, Laurie, that the research, because there's a lot of research that have been done into high-performing teams, and they have those characteristics about being smaller, having more equal conversation with each other,
exactly.
Right?
Yes. There's a lot of academic research on teams. You only forget there, Sandy Penton from MIT, Harvard have done a lot of interesting work. Google did some analysis of their teams, and they found psychological safety was a big deal as well. So we've tried to interpret those sorts of academic findings into the SWOOP measures so that we can measure how good a team is. So, and that's the way we've gone about our measuring on these groups.
Now, some of the other team types, the other group type is Q&A and communities. And I know that for the Q&A part, it might be more difficult to find academic research to sort of put in neutral or objective performance metrics. But that's a bit different for communities, is that right?
That's right. I think with the discussion area, we find that there's two uses of discussion areas. One is like your typical Q&A forum, where people just post a question and look for an answer from an expert. Typically you might see that in IT areas and problem-solving areas like that. But then you've got the community of practice area, where there is quite a depth of academic research on what makes a good community. So largely with Q&A type forums, the more people you've got, the better, because you've got more chance of getting your question answered. With the community, there is actually a sweet spot, and the research tells us, you should have, say, more than at least 100 people to get a good critical mass going, but maybe not more than 200 or 300, because then it's getting a bit too unwieldy. So yeah, I think we can certainly find some good metrics around communities, and I think the core thing, because it is a discussion, is that we are seeing a lot of toing and froing, right? We're seeing a lot of discussion. The discussion threads are longer and more numerous and so forth. So that's what we look for in terms of a high-performing community.
Now, a group type like announcements, is that really, that doesn't necessarily something you would associate with collaboration, is that right?
Exactly. I think announcements is really there for the social media side of things, and frankly, that's what a lot of people use Workplace for to start with, to do their announcements to the whole organisation. And of course, with an announcement group, the bigger the better, because we're still looking for some sort of feedback. It's not just a tell. We do want some sort of feedback. So we are looking for high performance announcements group are actually initiating some form of discussion as well. So,
or at least something that leads to reactions. Likes, and so on.
Yeah, so that we can. It's more than just people. Actually, I think it's more than just liking. We want people to voice an opinion. Do they like what they're hearing? So it also shapes what the announcement's about, you know. So if you're going to announce, you know, what the financial performance of the organisation was last quarter, well, that probably doesn't beg a discussion. But if you're going to announce a proposed new human resource policy, well, of course, that's going to promote some discussion, and you exactly want that sort of thing.
The last team type, I know anecdotally that some senior leaders are worried about, you know, how many of these social groups and are people doing frivolous work. What surprised me, which you'll find in the benchmarking report, is that only about 12% of groups actually fall into that social non-work type. But what are some of the, if you like, we know that they're important, those groups still, right? Because they're doing something for the companies.
Well, the surprise for me, exactly, with the social was that in terms of our cohesion measure, it was actually the second strongest after teams, you know, better actually than communities. So that was a surprise. And what it was telling us that when people are passionate about something, they will connect and they'll discuss and they will interact, you know, quite strongly. So if you think about that, you know, the power of the non-work team is connecting people that wouldn't normally connect in their normal work patterns. So obviously, if you've got a big social group that's public, you know, that then you've got more opportunity for those serendipitous connections, you know. There probably isn't a big call for small private social groups, I think. So what we're saying that, you know, a good social non-work group needs to be big, and it needs to be something that people are genuinely interested in. You know, so we often see, you know, the pets group or something like that, or Dress Up Friday, but, you know, it's fun, but it does bring people together and they do connect.
So what I think is something that really excites me is that for the first time, we're now able to put in performance metrics in groups, which allows us to then to say whether the project team is high performing, whether the announcement group is high performing, whether the Q&A and the community is high performing, and so forth. And we encourage you to download a copy of the report today. Look at the numbers in there, try to look at your own workplace groups and see where you can position your own groups. Thank you very much for listening, and thanks to Laurie for the huge amount of work you put into this.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.